So I want you to just look around the room you are in right now. Like, really look at the walls, the ceiling, the amount of floor space you have.
Right, just take a mental inventory.
Exactly. Take a second to mentally scan your whole living situation from, I don't know, the closet dimensions to the kitchen counter space. And now let me ask you, is this your absolute, unquestionable, ideal living space?
Oh man, that immediately triggers a mental checklist for people, doesn't it?
Oh, totally.
Because suddenly the fact that, the home office shares a wall with the laundry room feels a lot more pronounced.
Yeah, yeah.
Or like the realization that the kitchen doesn't quite have the footprint for two people to cook at the same time just becomes glaringly obvious.
Well, and we all have those, right? Like those specific structural frictions. But what happens when you take those individual frictions and scale them up to a national level?
Right, that's the big question.
So that's our mission for this deep dive today. We're looking into what the data is pointing to as this great Canadian housing gap.
It's a really fascinating term.
It is, and we have a stack of recent findings to go through. It's primarily anchored by this really interesting Ipsos survey that was conducted for Century 21 Canada.
Yeah, and they pulled, what, about 2,300 Canadians?
Yep, 2,300 Canadians between February 6th and 10th. And the goal was to figure out the exact coordinates of, what people want versus what they actually have.
Right, and the underlying mission here is to move past the just the raw real estate data, to really look at the psychological infrastructure of the housing market. We're examining how our physical environment correlates with our broader life satisfaction. And really how the historical definition of the Canadian dream is just, it's colliding head-on with modern macroeconomic realities.
Yeah, colliding is a good word for it. And I want to jump straight into the core revelation from the survey because I think it sets the table for everything else we're going to talk about.
Let's do it.
55% of Canadians admit they are not living in their ideal home. I mean, more than half the country is sitting in a living room right now, looking at the walls and feeling this distinct sense of compromise.
Yeah, that's a huge number.
It really is. So to understand why that gap exists, we first need to define the blueprint of what that ideal home actually looks like today.
Well, and the physical dimensions of this dream are just overwhelmingly focused on expansion. I mean, 63% of the respondents stated outright that their primary desire is a larger home.
Right, which on the surface sounds like a basic human desire, right? Just, wanting more stuff. But the survey gets incredibly specific about it.
It does, yeah.
The ideal size, on average, comes out to exactly 2,098 square feet.
Such a specific number.
Right. That specificity suggests this isn't just some vague wish for a mansion. It's a highly targeted number. And the critical context here is that 2,098 square feet is roughly 600 square feet larger than what many of these respondents currently occupy.
Which is a massive jump.
It is. I mean, I look at this missing 600 square feet and I don't see like a desire for larger walk-in closets. To me, that 600 square feet is basically an entire downtown apartment magically bolted onto your current home.
That's a great way to visualize it, actually.
Right. It looks like a trauma response to the past few years, people wanting physical buffer zones. So I've got to ask you, is this data pointing to a need for psychological boundaries, or are we just accumulating more possessions that require storage?
I mean, the shift is undeniably functional rather than purely materialistic.
Okay, how so?
Well, over the last decade, and, accelerating a lot recently, the home has been forced to absorb institutions that used to exist entirely outside of it.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Right. The home is now the corporate office. It's the fitness center. It's the entertainment complex.
Yeah, that's so true.
And when a structure is forced to fulfill all of those roles simultaneously, the existing floor plans just fail. So that missing 600 square feet you mentioned is the architectural equivalent of a pressure valve.
A pressure valve, wow.
Yeah, it's that dedicated space where the economic engine of the home like the office doesn't bleed over into the sanctuary of the dining room.
So we're essentially talking about the necessity of compartmentalization.
Exactly.
And you see that reflected in the layout preferences, too. The survey highlights 3 bedrooms and 2.5 bathrooms as the gold standard.
Right.
And we aren't just talking about places to sleep anymore. That 3rd bedroom is, it's basically the mandatory flex space for the modern economy.
It really is. It's the absolute baseline for functional harmony in a hybrid work era. You've got the primary suite, you have the secondary bedroom for a child or dependent, And then that crucial third room that just absorbs the overflow of modern life.
Yeah, the overflow room.
Exactly.
Ah.
And the 2.5 baths operate on that exact same logic of boundary preservation.
Right.
It lets a household host guests without those guests crossing into the private, vulnerable spaces of the home.
Right, no one wants their dinner guests walking past their unmade bed to use the washroom.
Precisely.
But what really fascinates me is how this specific desire for 2,100 square feet directly conflicts with what developers are actually building right now.
It's a huge disconnect.
Yeah, because the survey notes that 13% of Canadians currently live in homes under 500 square feet, but only 4% actually consider that ideal.
Right.
We see these urban centers flooded with micro-condos, yet the psychological demand from the public is entirely detached from that reality.
Well, and that is a defining tension of modern urban planning.
Right.
We have this massive push for densification, but the aspiration for the grander estate remains. I mean, look at the other extreme. The data shows 8% of Canadians live in homes over 3,000 square feet, yet a staggering 19% desire that level of massive scale.
Wow, 19%.
Yeah, so the bulk of the population is clustering around that moderate 2,100 square foot mark, but the actual inventory being built rarely hits that missing middle.
So let's talk about the structure itself, because that's another big piece of this. 59% want a single detached house, but currently only 51% live in one.
Right.
And Todd Shayak, the executive vice president of Century 21 Canada, is quoted in the report saying, "The Canadian dream of owning a moderate standalone house is as relevant today as it ever has been."
And the data absolutely backs him up.
But if everyone is supposedly, accepting the realities of urbanization and density, why is the market psychology still completely anchored to the detached house?
Because the detached home represents the ultimate cultural moat.
The cultural moat, I like that.
In North America, the concept of success is inextricably tied to the absence of shared walls. Like a shared stud with a neighbor represents a compromise of autonomy.
Oh, for sure.
You hear their footsteps, you smell their cooking, you are subject to their schedules. The standalone house, the four walls and the patch of grass, is the physical manifestation of complete environmental control.
That makes a lot of sense. You'd think, though, that hitting that 2,100 square foot detached mark is the golden ticket. But the survey reveals this really strange paradox.
Right, the satisfaction metrics.
Exactly. Size and structure don't strictly correlate with happiness if the tenure of the housing is wrong. The survey dives into what they call livability, and the divide between owners and renters is staggering.
It really is. We see a shift here from the architectural blueprint to the psychological blueprint.
Right.
When respondents were asked about top priorities beyond just square footage, 40% cited the condition of the home.
Okay.
38% pointed to the neighborhood. 32% said they require space for family or pets. And 29% prioritize access to a yard.
So the factors that make a house a home are highly experiential. It's not just a math equation.
Exactly.
But this brings us to the satisfaction gap. Sean Simpson, who is the senior vice president of Ipsos Public Affairs, pulled out this massive disparity based purely on housing tenure. 80% of homeowners say they love their home. But for renters, that number plummets to just 50%.
It's a huge drop-off.
It is. And I want to push back a little on how we interpret this. Is that 30-point drop-off really just about the title deed?
Well,
Or is it because renting inherently strips away those exact experiential livability factors we just listed? I mean, think about it. If you rent, you have zero control over the maintenance schedule. You rarely get a private yard, and landlords notoriously ban pets.
that's true.
So are renters unhappy because they lack financial equity, or simply because they can't adopt a dog and paint their walls?
I mean, it's a good question, but I would argue the financial equity and the title deed represent a much deeper psychological weight than you are giving them credit for.
Really?
Yeah, the deed isn't just paper. It is a structural shield. In North America, unlike, certain European countries with really robust multi-generational tenant protections, renting is inherently precarious.
Oh, absolutely. The rules are totally different here.
Right. You are always vulnerable to eviction, to massive rent hikes, to the whims of an owner who just decides to sell. So the financial equity of ownership is what provides the baseline of psychological safety.
Right.
Without that baseline, the inability to paint a wall is just a symptom of a larger systemic vulnerability.
I hear you. But you can feel financially secure in a long-term lease and still be completely miserable if the day-to-day environment is hostile to your lifestyle.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, if the 40% of people who value the condition of the home are renting, they are enduring a daily physical reminder of their lack of agency.
Yeah, the broken appliances?
Exactly. Staring at a broken fridge for 3 weeks waiting for a property manager isn't just an inconvenience. It's an active drain on your daily well-being that no amount of theoretical financial equity can fix.
That is a fair distinction. True autonomy really requires both the macro security of the deed and the micro control of the environment.
Yes, exactly.
When an owner fixes that appliance, they're investing in their own asset. When a renter waits for a fix, they're expending emotional energy on a structure that ultimately builds wealth for someone else. So I think the 80% satisfaction rate among owners is the compounding effect of both financial progress and that total environmental agency.
Which brings us to the real friction point of this entire deep dive.
The barriers.
Right. If we have the blueprint, the 2,100 square foot detached home, and we know that ownership drastically increases our life satisfaction through that compounding autonomy, why are 55% of people still stuck on the outside looking in?
Because the barriers erected around the modern housing market are just formidable. And the survey quantifies exactly what is keeping that 55% in a state of compromise.
So what's the biggest one?
The primary gatekeeper, unsurprisingly, is price. 59% of respondents cited the sheer cost as the biggest hurdle.
I mean, price is the obvious wall, right? But the secondary barriers are where the systemic dysfunction really shows up.
Yeah, definitely.
34% cited the actual cost and hassle of moving as a major obstacle.
Right. The friction.
Yes, we are talking about the housing lock-in effect, the transaction costs, the realtor fees, the land transfer taxes, just the sheer logistical nightmare of uprooting. They're so severe that people are actively choosing to stay in suboptimal spaces. The hassle of moving outweighs the benefit of gaining that extra bedroom.
And that creates a completely stagnant market. People who should be downsizing are trapped by the hassle, and people who need to upsize are trapped by the transaction costs.
Exactly.
And then we have the third major barrier, saving for the down payment, which was highlighted by 14% of respondents.
Which is separate from the overall price.
Right. This is distinct. You might have the monthly cash flow to support a mortgage, but accumulating the massive lump sum required up front, especially in an inflationary environment where rent just consumes your savings rate, it's a systemic bottleneck.
Yet, despite this trifecta of friction, the total price, the lock-in effect, and the down payment bottleneck, the market isn't entirely frozen.
No, it's not.
The data shows 19% of Canadians say they are likely to buy a home within the next year.
Right.
And the crucial demographic detail here is that more than half of those prospective buyers, 55% of them, are first-time buyers.
So these are the individuals actively trying to cross the chasm from that 50% renter satisfaction group into the 80% owner group. But their attempts to cross are met with just a brutal mathematical reality.
Okay, this is where the numbers get incredibly tense. The survey asked these prospective first-time buyers to outline their budgets. The average budget they are bringing to the table is $677,000.
Which is, historically speaking, a massive deployment of capital.
It's a fortune. But then you overlay that against these Statistics Canada national average home price, which currently sits at $698,881.
Right.
So you have a built-in shortfall of nearly $22,000 before a single offer is even drafted.
Yeah, it's a huge problem.
I mean, think about it like this. It's like showing up to a really nice restaurant knowing you only have exactly enough cash to cover the main course, but not the tax or the tip.
That's a painful spot to be in.
It is. Now, on a $700,000 asset, a $22,000 gap might look like a mere 3% difference to a casual observer, but in real estate mechanics, that 3% cash requirement is a broken rung on a ladder.
Absolutely.
You can have the income to climb, but without that upfront cash to satisfy the lending ratio and the stress test, the whole ascent fails. So how does this fractured mathematical reality impact the psychology of those buyers?
Well, it forces an immediate, brutal renegotiation of the dream.
Wow, yeah.
When you hit that broken rung, you don't just stop climbing. You have to find a different, shorter ladder. That $22,000 shortfall means the buyer must instantly start crossing items off that ideal blueprint we talked about.
All right.
The 2,100 square feet shrinks to 1,500. The detached home becomes a shared wall townhouse, or, to maintain the size, they're pushed geographically outward.
Adding an hour to their commute.
Exactly, which introduces entirely new vectors of stress into their lives.
Or they might be forced to compromise on the condition of the home, buying a property that requires immediate capital for renovations that they no longer have because every single cent went into the down payment.
Precisely the danger. First-time buyers are entering the largest financial transaction of their existence, not with a sense of triumph, but with a profound sense of concession.
Man, that's heavy.
They are paying absolute top-of-market prices while actively grieving the loss of the Canadian dream they were promised. The psychological toll of paying a premium to compromise is what makes the current housing discourse so incredibly volatile.
Paying a premium to compromise. That phrase alone just completely explains the underlying anxiety of the market. It is a deeply emotional negotiation between the life you envisioned and the life your lending ratio permits.
Well said.
And it brings us full circle to the 55% of Canadians who state they are not in their ideal home. They are living inside the residual outcome of those exact negotiations. They secured the shelter, but they had to sacrifice the autonomy or the space or the location to get it.
Right, they crossed the threshold into ownership, perhaps, but they landed in a space that still requires them to hold their breath. The buffer zones don't exist. The functional harmony of the 3 bedrooms and 2.5 baths was just abandoned at the negotiation table.
So how do we synthesize all of this for you, the listener, who might be sitting in a space right now wondering how your own housing trajectory aligns with all this data?
Right. What's the big takeaway?
Well, the blueprint of the Canadian dream remains remarkably stubborn. Despite massive shifts in urban planning, density, and economic structures, the baseline aspiration is still that 2,100 square foot, 3-bedroom detached house.
And we know conclusively that achieving this, and specifically owning it, correlates with a massive spike in overall life satisfaction.
Exactly. The 80% owner versus 50% renter divide proves that the autonomy of ownership is a real, measurable phenomenon.
Yet the macroeconomic forces are pushing in the exact opposite direction.
Yeah.
The soaring prices, the punitive transaction costs of moving, and the insurmountable down payment thresholds are creating a society defined by its housing gap. We're constantly measuring the distance between our deeply ingrained cultural expectations and the mathematical ceiling of our current reality.
Which leaves us with a necessary question to consider long after the survey numbers fade.
Okay, what is it?
Since 55% of people aren't in their ideal home and the average buyer's budget falls nearly $22,000 short of the average home price, something eventually has to give.
Definitely.
Will the Canadian dream of the detached 2,000 square foot house eventually have to shrink to fit the mathematical reality? Or will we forever be a society where the majority feel their current home is just a waiting room for something better?